Well, thank you, Marcello. Thank you for having me.
So, Pascal, thank you so much for joining us. No, you most welcome to drop us some geopolitical wisdom and let us know how the future of teenagerhood is going to be impacted by the current news that I have out there.
Yes, most definitely. So thank you for having me. It's obviously, I mean, on my end, it's a real pleasure to share my little bit of wisdom. It's somehow odd to me to reflect on my entrepreneurship when really I was definitely not brought up to be an entrepreneur at all. I happened to become one. But I can tell you there was definitely nothing planned to this. I, I will give you like a 2-minute background on myself. I grew up in France in a middle class family where children, boys and girls, were expected to do their best in school, graduate from high school, go to university, and then get a job. We had, regardless of whether we were boys or girls, we all had the same, expectations and the same kind of game plan, right? At, at the time, it was not really revolutionary, although I would say maybe compared to my friends, the idea that, we were, the insistence that boys and girls would be, traveling the same path was maybe a little more intense in my family than in my friends. But by getting a job, my parents and their friends, expected us to get hired in a company, preferably a big one, because it's a sign of longevity, right? Or they expected us to go into public service where you can spend, 30, 40 years rising up through the ranks and you have, stability. What was definitely not expected of us was to become an entrepreneur or a craftsman or to strike it on our own. And the reason for that was entrepreneurship was believed to be treacherous, right? Risky. So I, so in that sense, when I see, young teenagers thinking about improving the world and, doing all this on their own, I think you guys are trailblazers in a sense. So I was, being brought up in this way, I was definitely not looking to become an entrepreneur. I did, compared to you at the venerable age of 28, 30, because it was for me the only way to work. I had studied geopolitics, international relations, security studies, and in my late 20s, I moved from France to the US and settled there. And for obvious, security reasons, being a foreigner, I was not going to go to work for the US government or for a large US company. So I started to do freelancing. And from that, I mean, my business grew somewhat. And I always, find work, got repeat clients. So that carried me, for 20 years until I went into corporate America. So with that background in mind, it is a little bit odd for me to be dispensing, advice or some wisdom into becoming an entrepreneur, because I feel that to a large extent I became one, not as a result of any particular plan, but more because I kind of fell into it. It was more of a necessity. But that said, I will share with you a few insights. And I don't know, Marcello, if we do this, because I just, listened to the previous speaker. But is it possible for the audience to participate, to interact, to ask questions?
Well, it's quite flexible. We don't have
Okay.
many teenagers tonight, so the interaction is not going to be as intense as has been in previous sessions. But yeah, we can stop and ask questions anytime. Or the worst case, I'll be the one answering the questions and giving you back to.
Yes. Okay. So from my journey, and the topic that is, my field of work, in geopolitical risk, I think I would like to share with you about 4 or 5 insights. The first one is, kudos to these young, really young entrepreneurs in the making. I think that at this point in our geopolitical system, entrepreneurship and job self-creation is going to be key, even more important than before, to the economic well-being of humanity. And in that sense, the young generation of entrepreneurs, the young teenagers who are thinking about, how to improve the world, are really at the forefront of a vast economic transformation. So that in itself is kudos. I will say even, double kudos, since traditionally or historically, if you look at entrepreneurship, at least in the developed world, you're looking at, to simplify matters, the demographics is men over 40 who have had a career in small and big firms, and who decide that to take this learning experience and strike it on their own. Your network, Marcello, is completely different. You guys are, teenagers with a purpose, but without the experience. So this is something absolutely remarkable and, very exciting as a development. I don't really think that there is a lot of historical, examples of this kind of movement. And so it's very difficult to anticipate, how it will transform the economy of tomorrow. That brings me to a second point. When we talk about entrepreneurship, a lot of it is about the mechanics of how to make it work. So on the economic side, on the business side, on the technology side. And there is no doubt that all of this is necessary. But there is a second piece that needs to accompany this, I will say, skills acquisition process. And it's the process of the philosophical meaning, of the enterprise. What is it on a philosophical level, on a social level, on a moral level, what it is that you really want to achieve, put the humanity back into the process. It's not just a process of, okay, getting your product, finalizing your product, getting it to market, etc. It is also the higher purpose of what you're trying to do. And to that end, I always have to remind clients that technology is value neutral. It can be mobilized for good and it can be mobilized for bad. A person, if you look back at the 1920s and 30s, Goebbels would never have been the man that he was, without radio and television. It was exciting, it was new technology, it was exciting. It could be, and we have leveraged it for the better and also for the worse. So as you are consumed by building, your new enterprise, read books, read, humanities, and think about the higher ground, the higher purpose of your enterprise. And my third point is about experience. Experience is key to being successful in entrepreneurship. A lot, in my view, that's probably why the traditional demographic of entrepreneurs is, people who have a sizable professional experience. So you will hear people tell you, well, when you are an entrepreneur, you need to have failures, you need to be knocked down, and then you get up again, and that's how you learn, etc. Well, it certainly is, but if you can avoid the failure because you are benefiting from the experience of others, maybe that's a shorter path to success. So I would encourage you to build, to network with, successful entrepreneurs, with your peers, and to learn from each other, in a kind of lessons learned, interactive, back and forth this is what I do, this is, you know, where I failed, this is what's not working, this is, you know, how I went around. So that I think is very important. And my last point is, you know, as part of these iterative process of experience, it's important to take the time to reflect on what you do as you do it. And reflection doesn't have to be, oh, well, you know, I did this wrong and I have to change it. It can also be, oh, this is working really well, so I want to continue doing, you know, doing this. Or, oops, I didn't expect this to go that well. Let me understand why. So you build that that knowledge, and you are able to share it or to pass it on. That's it.
Well, it's really important. We mentioned many times here before that you really want to benefit from the experience of others. In fact, it's a core value of accelerating your wisdom, right? So you nailed it on the head there, and the way that you can accelerate your path toward wisdom without having unnecessary failures that are expensive and painful, right? Some people just give up because they failed too many things and in too many ways. And this is precisely what we're trying to do here, you know, getting the teenagers to learn from each other and then to understand how to make better choices. So thanks for sharing that concept
Good.
with us in a very
Good.
specific way. And it's great that you have this multicultural experience as well, you know, coming from France. And it's quite remarkable, like, you know, middle class upbringing in France, and all of a sudden you're analyzing geopolitics in the United States. uh, it kind of shows that anything is possible, right? You know, if you know, follow your instinct.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Definitely lots of things are possible, lots of choices available. Maybe, you know, maybe sometimes even too many choices. You know, I don't know. I think it's daunting for kids now to find, you know, what is the right choice.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it's worse than that. I mean, as a previous speaker mentioned, teenagers now are the most depressed ever, right? And they're being over medicated and everything else. And this is a whole, not only conversation, this could be a whole conference talking about over medication of teenagers for no reason whatsoever. And that's because they see perfect lives in Instagram, and they think that, oh, this is what I should aspire for. It's like, no, this is fake. Like that car is not uh, for real. It's a rented car, or this is just Photoshop, or this is just makeup. And you have teenagers now that are comparing themselves with something that doesn't even exist, which is not the case in the past. So it's a very serious no problem indeed.
Yeah, well, this goes back to the point that I was trying to make about, you know, technology being value neutral.
Yeah.
It's, yes, you know, everything new is going to breed, you know, you engage in something because you think, oh, okay, I see this is, you know, there is a lack of something. I can fill that gap by building that tool. But then you do not anticipate that the tool itself can be, you know, can be used in a different way. So this is, you know, you could talk about Facebook and Twitter with, you know, hate speech and racist speech and, you know, anti-Semitic speech and all that. So that's part of the reflective process and the learning from, from others, that hopefully can keep you from experiencing this kind of backlash.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very deep topic, but for the moment we have to move on. Just that is a note for people to consider by themselves how did it affect us. And thank you so much, Pascale, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Have a great evening.
Yes.
Bye-bye.